Afternoon, everyone. This is the Thursday, February 7th. Thank you. February 7th, 2019 session of the Portland City Council. Cut. Let's take two. Yeah, it's been a long week. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Carla, please call the roll.
Fritz.
Here.
Fish.
Here.
Hardesty.
Here.
Udaly.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Good afternoon.
Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all.
Matt, excuse me, turn your mic on. You just hit that gray button. Thank you.
Are we on?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during city council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. If it does not, you may be ruled out of order. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you're in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Please remain seated in council chambers unless entering or exiting. If you are filming the proceedings, please do not use bright lights or disrupt the meeting. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruptions will result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Thank you very much. Carla, we only have one item today, item 113. Could you please read it?
The City of Portland condemns white supremacist and alt-right hate groups.
Colleagues, I'm going to withhold my remarks till the end, but I don't know if anybody would like to make opening remarks. Commissioner Fish.
Mayor, I'd like to begin by thanking my colleagues, each of you, your respective staff, and community advocates for working collaboratively to draft this resolution and to organize this hearing. I'm proud that Council is speaking up in a strong, unified voice against hate, bigotry, and white supremacy. Now, we know that we can't change the future if we don't acknowledge our history. Our city and our state have a long legacy of racism that we are still dealing with today. Today's action, however, is intended to make our values loud and clear. We thrive from our diversity. We believe in building bridges rooted in respect and inclusiveness. We are a proud sanctuary city. We, City Council, and the City of Portland are united in rejecting white supremacy and white nationalism, and we are committed to creating a future that we can all be proud of. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. So the order of events today is we're going to call up staff to give us some remarks and the run of show. So Nicole Grant, she is my senior policy advisor. If you want to come on up, start us off. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Nicole Grant, Senior Policy Advisor to Mayor Wheeler. And I'm here to introduce today's resolution condemning white supremacy. This resolution is the culmination of several weeks of work beginning late last year, involving contributions from each of your offices. I'd like to thank Asena Lawrence, Winta Johannes, Cynthia Castro, and Derek Bradley for their collaborative efforts in bringing this resolution before you. In working on this, we contended with the question of whether this resolution and its symbolism would be meaningless. Mayor, you and I had this conversation as well. What good are words when people of color are assaulted on the street without provocation? When we are subjected to racial epithets at a high school basketball game? When our identities and citizenship statuses are dissected, mocked, and undermined for political ends? And when we continue to face discrimination in nearly every facet of American life? This resolution is not about white people. It is about all people, with a dedicated focus on those who are targeted as a result of their skin color. It is about encouraging all Portlanders to live up to our highest aspirations, not only in word, but also in deed. Yes, this resolution is a clear denunciation of white supremacist and alt-right hate groups, which continue to treat Portland as their playground and levy threats against our mayor and fellow community members. However, this goes beyond public safety and speaks to a need for a cultural shift in this city. White supremacy isn't solely embodied in hate groups. It is woven into the fabric of Portland, Oregon, past and present. It is not an abstraction. It feeds on itself and affects us all daily. While sitting down for lunch with my family here in Portland a couple of years ago, an older white gentleman a few feet away had been glaring at me. I found it odd and tried not to give it too much thought. My husband, who is white, stepped away, and my stepson and I took that as an opportunity to give each other butterfly kisses while we waited for my husband to return. And I remember turning in the man's general direction and seeing the disgust on his face. Then he scoffed. He appeared to be so offended by the sight of us that he turned away, but then was compelled to look again, actively feeding his anger. He would turn away and then look, turn away and then look. And I contemplated leaving the restaurant once my husband returned, but the man beat me to the punch. He left abruptly, shaking his head and muttering before the server could even bring him his glass of water. This is Portland, and it happens every day. And I'm not alone in this. And there are so many more stories out there that reflect experiences similar to mine. As a woman of color, specifically as a Black woman, I'm constantly aware of my physicality in predominantly white spaces. It has more so the case for me here in Portland than anywhere else I've lived. I look over my shoulder more than I ever have in my life. There's an emotional burden that comes with fighting for recognition and inclusion in spaces that were not envisioned to empower or protect bodies like mine. And it is frightening how ordinary this is for so many of us. The invisible baggage that we carry every day is demoralizing and exhausting. We know that the fatigue many of us feel goes beyond our individual experiences and interactions and is exacerbated by the predictable drumbeat of lower graduation rates, lower wages, higher incarceration rates, rising suicide rates, higher poverty rates, higher mortality rates, and the fundamental knowledge that there is an impossible number of stories waiting to be told and uplifted. All of this is a function of white supremacy, a function of the historical impact of white supremacy and the policies implemented by civic institutions that ostensibly have been meant to serve all people, but predictably only manage to serve some. This resolution puts a marker down for the city of Portland. This is important because it has not been done before with the collective voices of our city council. Do not underestimate the impact of your words in speaking out against white supremacy when doing so appears to be the exception. It matters to have these words represented by the privilege and power of that dais. It is one step in our efforts to counter white supremacy with the intent of taking many more in order to create more space for people of color in this city to thrive and live authentically. I'd like to now move on to the run of show for this afternoon. We have two panels of invited guests. The first panel features Eric Ward and Amy Hertzfeld Koppel from the Western States Center and Bobbi Singh from the Oregon Justice Resource Center. The second panel features Alan Lazo from Portland United Against Hate and the Fair Housing Council, Maria Garcia from the New Portlanders Policy Commission and Revolucion Coffee House, and Wajdi Saeed from the Muslim Educational Trust. After the panels conclude, public testimony will be accepted and then followed by your closing remarks. I'd like to now invite Eric Ward, Amy Hertzfeld Koppel, and Bobbi Singh to the table to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. Before you leave, Nicole, I just want to thank you so much. I know how hard it is to put those personal stories out in the public airwaves. And just know that you are certainly not alone in having those experiences in Portland, Oregon. So I just want you to know how much I appreciate you being willing to share your own story.
Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
that.
Thank you, Nicole. Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. The microphones move around about 6 inches away is the right distance, we think. And if you could just state your names again for the record, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a sequence here, so
Okay,
I'm
great.
honored to go first. Mayor Wheeler, City Commissioners, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us to speak to this historic resolution. My name is Amy Hertzfeld Koppel, and I'm the Deputy Director of Programs and Strategic Initiatives at Western State Center. I grew up in Idaho, a state that has a unique history of successfully countering Aryan nations activity. I've been active in human rights organizing and advocacy for more than 20 years, including several years as the executive director of the Idaho Human Rights Education Center, and most recently as co-executive director of Basic Rights Oregon. I moved to Portland from Boise in 2011, drawn to a community and state that would provide more affirmation and security to start my family. Idaho still lacks non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ folks. And I also moved here because I wanted to be in closer proximity to Western State Center, a group that I deeply respect and served on the board of for 11 years before joining the staff team last year. Western State Center is a 30-year-old civil rights and social justice organization based here in Portland, but serving grassroots justice leaders and organizations in the Pacific Northwest and Mountain States. Part of Western State Center's work is to monitor white nationalist and other racist and sexist extremist movements, and to work with community leaders to find effective solutions to defend our democracy from the threat that these social movements pose to vulnerable communities and to our democracy itself. We believe that this resolution today is the right first step. The resolution condemns white supremacist, alt-right, and white nationalist hate groups. And I want to provide some additional context about these groups and why they present an urgent threat to our city's residents and democratic institutions. White supremacy is a system of subjugation of people of color to preserve privilege and power for white people. And it's based on 3 core pillars. First, slavery and the exploitation of labor, particularly anti-Blackness. Second, the genocide of indigenous peoples and exploitation of their resources. And finally, the control of sexuality in women. It's baked into U.S. history and culture, dating back to our nation's founding with the genocide and forced removal of Native Americans and the shameful institution of slavery, which helped build the U.S. economy into a global powerhouse. Here in Oregon, our own history of Black and Chinese exclusion laws have profoundly shaped our state's demographics and attracted those who sought to create a white homeland in our region. White supremacy is a system that operates within our institutions and endures in everyday life in the United States. And it creates inequities that provide a breeding ground for white nationalism. This resolution cites several very relevant examples of how institutionalized white supremacy has shaped Portland's policies and practices today. They include policing and sentencing disparities in our criminal justice system, displacement of communities of color, and disparate access to public services. Nationally, white supremacist policies, including voter suppression laws, anti-immigrant family separation policies, and the protection of Confederate monuments shape our political landscape, creating a climate where white nationalism can flourish. By contrast, white nationalism is a bigoted social movement that seeks to create a white-only ethno-state. Its supporters seek to build political power to achieve that ideological vision by implementing extreme racist, anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, homophobic, and transphobic policies. White nationalists and aligned alt-right groups often have deeply anti-government ideologies, making them a threat not just to vulnerable communities, but to our democratic institutions. We find it troubling that while the vast majority of Americans reject white nationalists, according to 2018 data that Western State Center commissioned in a public polling scan from the Oregon firm DHM Research, 31% of Americans and Oregonians alike agree with a core tenet of white nationalist ideology, that America should protect and preserve its European heritage. This speaks to the urgent need for leaders to send a clear, resounding message that bigotry will not be tolerated in our community, that hateful ideologies have no place in mainstream political debate, and that the goals of white nationalists and other hate movements are incompatible with our city's goals of upholding inclusive democracy. This resolution is a laudable first step. Eradicating white supremacy and protecting our democracy from the threat of white nationalism will take long-term commitment and resources from you and your staff, but is certainly a task worth undertaking. White nationalism and white supremacy have been allowed to flourish in our national climate of rancor and division. This is an urgent challenge that we must face on a national level. We recognize it is not unique to Portland or our region, but this resolution and subsequent actions will be a model for the rest of the country. Western State Center commends your leadership for taking this step at the local level. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Mayor Wheeler and commissioners, thank you for providing us with this opportunity to testify. My name is Eric Ward. I'm the executive director of Western State Center. When I was a young teenager, I convinced my mother to give me this amazing t-shirt she had in her dresser. It was golden yellow and it had Oregon written across the front in green. I loved that shirt. And I wore it literally until I wore it out. It was over a decade later before I realized that it represented the late 70s colors of the University of Oregon. That shirt made me feel that Oregon was a state that fit well with my tenacious, quirky but respectful, and independent personality. While it would be more than 10 years before I would actually come to Oregon, I take deep pride in the fact that in one way or another, I've called Oregon my chosen home since I was a child. That is why I'm here before you today. I'm here to speak up on behalf of my home, Portland, Oregon. For nearly 30 years, I've worked with governments, local community groups, and national civil rights organizations, responding to bigoted movements who utilize violence and intimidation to undercut democracy and the rule of law. While discussing today how to challenge bigoted social movements, it is important to remember that white nationalism is deeply rooted in dangerous anti-Semitism. In addition, white nationalism falsely promotes the conspiracy that Jews, people of color, women, immigrants are responsible for the perceived threats to their goal of creating a white-only ethno-state. The recent Tree of Life synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, where 11 worshipers were killed, shows how deadly white nationalism can be when it is allowed to flourish. Where white nationalist rhetoric is allowed to be pushed into the mainstream, hate violence follows. While hate violence is widely unreported, FBI hate crime data for 2017, the most recently available, shows that hate crimes spiked 23% nationally, making it the third rise in 3 years in a row. And according to a recent report by the Anti-Defamation League, far-right extremists were responsible for every extremist killing in the United States last year. The potent combination of bigotry and violence central to white nationalism is a serious threat to community safety. Sadly, our region has attracted white nationalists and other racist and sexist paramilitary groups. That is because of our history and because of our demographics, but also a challenge to Portland's reputation as a progressive stronghold. These include anti-government paramilitary groups like Patriot Prayer, the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and the Three Presenters. as well as neo-Nazis and racist skinheads like Northwest Hammerskins. These groups seek to sow violence and mayhem in our community. They drain public resources, destabilize our public institutions, and threaten the safety of people of color, women, LGBTQ residents, immigrants, and religious minorities. When people ask me, as they often do, why Portland has been such a nexus for these groups, I'm reminded of a jarring moment from a Patriot Prayer rally. It wasn't an act of violence. It was a conversation between an alt-right activist and a bystander who asked him why he was there. His response struck me. He said, "You can say you don't want us here, but you're doing something we could never do. You're getting rid of your Black population." He undeniably had a point. While we, the city of Portland, must draw a clear moral line against hate, we also must remember that one of the keys to our success is to address the underlying systemic discrimination that allows the alt-right, white nationalist, and others to perceive that they are welcomed in our city. That's why I'm happy we're having this critical conversation. I commend you for taking steps with today's resolution to condemn alt-right and white nationalist groups and to affirm our city's values of equity and inclusion. This resolution is significant because it recognizes the historic and current harm and trauma that both white supremacy and white nationalism has inflicted on communities of color. The resolution unequivocally rejects the organized bigotry seeking to exploit intolerance and undermine the safety and the stability of our communities. It affirms our city's commitment to dismantling white supremacy in our city's policies and practices. And it commits to critical next actions, providing training for city staff to understand the growing threat of bigoted social movements. We hope this resolution can be an example to other communities around the nation. We look forward at Western State Center to supporting your leadership in any way we can to implement these goals. Together, we can ensure that bigotry has no place in Portland. I thank you all for your leadership today.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler, for being here. We appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Mayor Wheeler, commissioners, thank you for having me here today. My name is Bobbi Singh. I'm the executive director of the Oregon Justice Resource Center, which is a statewide nonprofit that provides legal services to currently and formerly incarcerated individuals and also advocates for systemic reform. We believe that mass incarceration, including over-incarceration, mass conviction, and wrongful convictions, is in fact the greatest civil rights crisis of our time, and that we must all take ownership of it. Importantly, through our work, when we openly acknowledge how institutional racism and the shameful legacy of bigotry and prejudice of our past connect to our current policies, we quickly understand that we continue to sustain the operation of a discriminatory and wealth-sensitive justice system where those at the margins are always in the crosshairs. This sickens our communities, our state, and our nation. Until we recognize and accept the straight line that exists from our justice system to white supremacy and allow the terms of our debate to be shaped by what is politically possible, we'll only continue to take tiny steps and call them major. Unless we're willing to unapologetically stand up and support those who speak out for racial justice and equality, we will continue to foster a culture in which Black, brown, and the other will always be brutalized by our justice system. Unless we're willing to confront this racism and bigotry directly, we'll continue to bear witness to the senseless harassment, terrorizing, and killings of Black, brown, and the other. Unless we are more courageous, we will continue to experience the type of heartbreak that our community experiences because of the belligerent acts perpetuated by those hate and paramilitary groups who desire to intimidate, push out, and terrorize our fellow community members under the ideology of white supremacy. Silence, timidness, complacency from our elected leaders are far more destructive and toxic in our society than anything else. We must speak out. We must act with greater desperation. There is now a very clear right and wrong side to all of this. History will not look too kindly on those who have the power to intervene but are choosing not to take real, meaningful action. Moreover, we must abandon our adherence to incrementalism, which has resulted in profound failure. We are currently fighting the same fundamental battles that we were fighting during the mid-20th century. There is a broad awakening and soul-searching happening in this country to racial justice issues, and we're currently involved in a ruthless fight nationally and locally in defining what is America, who is American. There are those who are pushing for very narrow and exclusive definitions, either outwardly under the rhetoric and ideology of white supremacy or responding through silence and inaction. We must not remain silent in this fight. We must push for the most generous and expansive definition of those who are included and embraced in our community. We must unapologetically lead with the values of compassion, dignity, and respect, and ensure as we navigate through this conversation that we're always protective of individual rights and liberties. In this moment in time, we must openly acknowledge the harms that we have caused and our failures to so many in our communities, and act with urgency on that awareness. And I want to be clear, many communities have never ever known what it means to be included and fully embraced by Oregon and have suffered profound trauma. And with recent events, we're forced to accept a harsh reality that has existed for so long and is now in full display for all to see. And that is the legacy of white supremacy and other ideologies of hate that perpetuate systems of power and control over minority and marginalized populations are entrenched in all layers of our government, and we must now navigate through that collective trauma of unbearable magnitude that will take time to fully heal. One of the greatest forms of privilege and oppression is telling a segment of our community that the advancement of their rights and liberties may be disruptive to their political agenda or to a political agenda or a career. To that end, through this resolution, I commend your affirmation of the city's value of equity and inclusion and the recognition of the harms and trauma experienced by so many in our community. The city's condemnation of white supremacist, alt-right, and white nationalist hate groups is a powerful first step in moving an important conversation forward. The importance of elected leaders in our city to send a clear and unambiguous message that openly acknowledges the harms caused by white supremacy and groups that profess to advance this ideology cannot be overstated. And the significance of giving recognition to the experiences of so many so often ignored is a profound first step towards reconciliation and reparation. The complexity of the problem before us is great, and that will require complexity in our solutions and in our thinking. And I'm here today to affirm our commitment to working with the city in identifying and implementing concrete, holistic next steps that will work to dismantling white supremacy in our city's policies and practices. Some may say that the resolution is nothing more than lip service or an empty gesture. I would disagree. There's a difference between empty gesture and symbolism. In this instance, words matter. In this instance, symbols matter. This resolution absolutely matters. You have to tell the truth before you can get to reconciliation. And culturally, we've done a terrible job of truth-telling in this state about our history of racial inequality. This resolution is a direct response to the absence of truth and the silence that has haunted us for too long. We look forward to working with you as partners as you move forward, and I sincerely thank you for your leadership on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Thank you, all three of you, for being here today. Appreciate it. And as Nicole had mentioned, the second panel is Alan Lazo from the Portland United Against Hate and the Fair Housing Council, Maria Garcia from New Portlanders Policy Commission, and Wajdi Saeed from the Muslim Education Trust. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners, and welcome, Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me here today. My name is Alan Lazo. I'm the Executive Director of the Fair Housing Council of Oregon. We're a private, nonprofit civil rights organization whose mission is to end housing discrimination and ensure equal access to housing opportunity throughout the state. I'm here today speaking on behalf of Portland United Against Hate, a coalition of more than 65 community-based and civic groups working to counteract hate in the Portland community. These groups represent many communities most impacted by the current rise of white supremacy and white nationalism today. Our coalition already has brought forward a letter of support that I'll give to the council here, thanking you all for your leadership in working to end hate in our communities and condemning the rise of white supremacy and white nationalism. Coalition members, as you know, were here just last month reporting on the work that we've all done in partnership with the city and the Office of Community and Civic Life. So you know the investment that already has been made in our community-based hate incident tracking tool and the numerous community-led resources that have been created and deployed to combat hate in our city. Portland United Against Hate Coalition members already are equipped to respond to, interrupt, and importantly, prevent incidences of hate in our community. Our coalition and our numerous community members continue to stand ready as your partners to work together to create policy that changes and addresses the city's role in combating white supremacy today. We applaud the efforts to empower our city's employees with the necessary knowledge and training to create a Portland that embraces safety and belonging for the diverse members of our community. From my perspective, in a civil rights organization that's rooted in racial segregation and discrimination in housing, I also particularly applaud the language in the resolution, excuse me, acknowledging our government's role in the systemic and institutional history of racism in housing that took place across the country, as well as right here in our city. These past institutional practices, again, many brought forth and upheld lawfully by government jurisdictions, had their roots in white supremacy. That environment also manifested itself during historical times of rising white nationalism in this country. We think about these once legal institutional practices as long gone now, made illegal 50 years ago through that Fair Housing Act that we commemorated together last year. Yet they have created lasting legacies of racial tensions and disparities in our communities. The intentional racial segregation and denial of opportunity of these long-past policies continue to echo today in areas as far-reaching as the racial wealth gap, educational achievement, and violent and deadly encounters between law enforcement and communities of color across the country and right here in Portland. Further, institutional and systemic practices and policies also serve to reinforce the hate that spreads to the personal level, to that on-the-street level. We have a history as a city and a state that literally intended to separate us. We have groups coming into our community intent on dividing us with hate. But we are thankful today for your statement that we will stand together, united against these historical and systemic forces, united against today's hateful forces, to say that together we will not tolerate hate, but stand together united in peace, respect, inclusivity, and equity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lazo. We appreciate your being here.
Buenas tardes. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and City Commissioners representing our board. Welcome, Commissioner Hardesty. My name is Maria Garcia. I am a woman, immigrant, business owner, and one of the 3 co-chairs of the New Portlanders Policy Commission. Because my leadership is rooted in community organizing, I believe in the values you have listed in this resolution and the language of them being rooted in peace, respect, inclusivity, and equity. But I cannot say that it's because of our city's strength and diversity. I must tell you that I am also a member of the activist community, and I advocate for immigrants and oppressed people throughout Portland and surrounding communities, including incarcerated Latino men and in high security prisons all over Oregon. I have found it hard to promote the values listed in this resolution when engaging with City of Portland. I have witnessed the lack of dignity and value placed on community members seeking resolution for their experiences. I have witnessed violence and rhetoric used to deflect from accountability by the very agencies and leaders who stand up and speak on the terms and values of equity and inclusion. I have sat with members of this city who have spoken for hours about the need for civic engagement and direct support and education in all sectors of the city business and management, only to be rejected when they push toward the due process. This city does not have the answers. None of us really do. We have to truly want to be inclusive in order to add texture for this type of resolution. A community partnership takes an established and committed effort to unite and build. It is time for us to engage in our neighborhoods and develop relationships that matter. Our children need this, and we need this for our future. I like the idea of a resolution against white supremacy and alt-right hate groups, but it does not make me feel any safer. As an advocate for incarcerated youth and Latino men, I assure you that many white supremacist individuals exist everywhere, including the judicial system, county jails, and state prisons. Severe punishment and tough on crime laws are not working as we expected. Measure 11 is a clear example. Personal experience has revealed this problem is at worst at prison. It has gotten so bad that people segregate, white with whites, black with blacks, Latinos with Latinos. We had riots of more than 200 people inside a high-security prison in Salem due to racism in 2016 and 2017. Being a Mexican national, a victim of the first attack, and I know this as a fact because I advocate for him. What does this say about this community, about us, about our safety? The moment we convicted people with racist beliefs that have committed hate crimes, they're going to socialize and strengthen ties with their peers in jail who have similar beliefs, and even recruit innocent ones that will be joining out of fear just for survival. Eventually, these individuals will get released and commit hate crimes again and continue recruiting more people. We need cohesive solutions, addressing not just inside the city, but inside county and state prisons. Addressing racism from inside the walls also need to be a priority. I ask City Council to work in partnerships with county jails and Oregon Department of Corrections to make sure these individuals receive the attention needed, implementing perhaps a dropout program like other states. Also, this resolution cannot make any of us safer if we cannot even discuss what happened in August of 2016 to a child in this city who has not been the first nor the last. He happened to be the one we quickly forget, the one whose name should also be listed in this document. I will say his name on the record and extend to the council that when we speak of resolutions against hate, that we should make sure that all of us are partnered in making it work. Darnell Bruce mattered to this community and was killed by white supremacists publicly and without remorse. Please say his name and stand up for all communities affected by working not selectively towards a better Portland, but by holding leaders accountable, providing resources to people committed to this work. Gracias.
Thank you. We appreciate your being here today. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Respected Mayor, respected Commissioners, congratulations, dear Joanne, Commissioner Hardesty. And I'm very glad today, growing up with 9 sisters, to see a majority woman in the City Council. Peace be upon you all. I'm very thankful for being here today. My name is Wajdi Saeed. I'm a member of the Arab American community and the American Muslim community. I'm a member of the New Portlander Policy Commission, and more important as well, a member of the Beloved community. According to Harry Belfont, he says that although slavery may have been abolished, the crippling poison of racism still persists, and the struggle still continues. And according to my teachers, saying that, racism comes in many different forms. Sometimes it's a subtle and private, and sometimes it's public and overt, and sometimes it's violent, and sometimes it's harmless. But it's definitely here. It's something that I think we are all guilty of, and we have to make sure that we deal with our own personal racism in the right way. Racism stinks, xenophobia stinks, bigotry stinks, hypocrisy stinks, Islamophobia stinks. Whatever our race, religion, color, we must stand in solidarity, change codes with our institutions, and speak loudly and passionately against racism of all shapes and all forms. Our Constitution states that we are all one nation under one God. It also states that we are created equal and no one person bears superiority over other. This is the opposite of what white supremacy stands today. The very ideology of white supremacy has been since the slavery, since the indigenous ethnic cleansing, stands against everything that this country or these founding fathers and mothers have created. It is inherent racism and the culture of hate lie against the very principles on which this nation and these great religions were founded. It is time that we, the people, reclaim our narrative, the narrative of humanity, a dignified humanity, as humanity, and revive our nation's founding principles. There is no black and white, and there is no yellow and brown. There is only one color, that is the human color, the human race. Our dear beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, linked our humanity to one body. If one part of this body aches, the rest of it rushes to help bring about healing and strength. We're currently aching within our homes, we're aching with our schools, we're aching with our city, we're aching within our state and within the liberal and the conservative circles. It is easy for us to point fingers at conservatives, but really we are all guilty. Each and every one of us, we need to collectively act to bring about healing and unifying to our private and public squares in a meaningful way and in a holistic manner. Over 50 years ago, Malcolm X, Al-Haj Malik Shabazz, addressed the same issue. He says, if you stick 9 inches into my back and put it out 3 inches, that is not progress. That is not progress even if you pull it all the way out. That is not progress. Progress is healing the wound, and America hasn't even begun to pull out the knife. That was over 50 years, and here we are in the 21st century in 2019, having barely scratched the surface. I'll close with the following saying that Martin Luther King has said. Dr. King, he says, I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war, that the bright daybreak of peace and the brotherhood and sisterhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth, unconditional love will have the final say. Now is the time, my dear respected mayor and respected commissioners. Now is the time that we do something boldly. I urge the city council today to proclaim a unified stance against white supremacy, against all of racism within city government, once and for all, for the safety and the dignity of our city, and once for all for the safety and dignity of our communities, our children, and our humanity. Respected councilmen and women, it is very important that we come from the lips talk into an action, into a system of change to reform within our city government and city of Portland and the state of Oregon. Thank you for your bold leadership, and thank you, and may God bless you and bless your families and bless us all. Amen.
Thank you, Wajdi. Thank you, all three of you, for your testimony. We appreciate it. So, colleagues, that completes our invited testimony. At this point, Carla will open it up for public testimony. How many people do we currently have signed up?
Oh, we have 8 people signed up.
Very good. We can extend 3 minutes per person, please.
Okay.
And I would just ask people, when your 3 minutes is up, if you could please stop so I don't have to play microphone cop. 3 minutes. You'll see the yellow light come on 30 seconds before your time is up. The red light comes on when your time is expired. Thank you, Carla. The first 3, please.
First 3 are Randy Blazek, I believe it's Dacia Graber, and Shedrick J. Wilkins.
And has everybody signed up who wants to sign up? Very good, Carla. We'll close the list, please. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commission. My name is Randy Blazek. I'm the chair of the Oregon Coalition Against Hate Crimes. The coalition has been in existence since 1997 as a coalition of community and local and federal and state government agencies to combat hatred. And I've been spending a lot of time talking about the history of white supremacy in our state, but today, in my brief time, I'd like to talk about the impact of hate on our communities, not just hate that comes from things that are defined as criminal by our state intimidation statutes and federal civil rights laws, but things that are legally protected by the First Amendment that go on as hate incidents. What we know from the research is that the impact of hate is wide, and there are ripples of hate. We know that the victims of hate experience greater psychological trauma than normal crime victims and normal victims of negative social interactions, including longer depression, more likely to change their behavior, more likely to experience fear, and even higher rates of depression. And they experience those incidences much differently than normal victims of crime. But on the second way are the members of those communities who also experience waves of anxiety, that they might be the next targets. And there's sort of this ripple effect that goes out beyond the immediate victims and the targets of that hatred, where those folks experience greater levels of anxiety, including changing their behavior patterns. They may be afraid to go out. They may be afraid to exist in this state. And then the next wave of impact is on neighboring communities, other marginalized communities who feel like they may be targeted as well. And so there is this incredible ripple effect that flows out through the communities. And then communities themselves begin to suffer. Those communities expand over physical space, but also across time. Those things that happened 30 years ago can be discussed by those communities like they happened yesterday. There is a real similarity with post-traumatic stress syndrome around these issues of hate that exist, and people are constantly reminded by stories in the news or other incidents that happen to other people that raises those anxiety levels. And then lastly, the place itself becomes stigmatized by those incidents of hate. Can you say Laramie, Wyoming, or can you say Jasper, Texas, without thinking of the crimes that happened there over 20 years ago? Similarly, Portland, Oregon, because of the murder of Mulugeta Sarah and the incident that happened on the Max in 2017, have been associated with these crimes. And I get regular calls from people outside the state say, can I be safe in Portland, Oregon? Can I be safe in a place where the alt-right marches, where these horrible crimes have happened? Is this a welcoming place? And so those impacts are far and wide. This isn't a normal social interaction. This is something that has a neutron bomb effect on communities. So it's really important to send a very clear message out that these values are not the city's values. And I really want to be here as a representative of the coalition to commend the work that you're doing and the importance of sending this message out far and wide about the importance of saying we are a welcoming place and we don't agree with these things that have happened in our community that have characterized our community. And thank you for your work.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Dacia Graber. I have been here before as a labor advocate for equity and inclusion, but today it's different. I'm here today as a student of Homeland Security at Concordia University, where I am currently doing my capstone on white supremacy, extremism, and proliferation in the Portland metro region. I've spent the last 2 years immersed in the studies of groups and individuals in our region, some of whom are in this very room today. So, it is an honor and a privilege to be here today as this council declares a bold and courageous path to both acknowledge the racist history and structures in place in the region, and more importantly, to forge a path forward and commit to exposing and ultimately eradicating white supremacy extremism. Where there is a will, there is a way. As others have mentioned, in 2018, all U.S. extremist murders and violence were at the hands of far-right and white supremacy extremists. In that spirit, I would also urge the council to recognize that while we have groups that foment hate and exploit our differences, the majority of deadly attacks are at the hands of what has historically been called the leaderless resistance and lone wolves. This ideology dates back to Louis Beam in the 1980s, the man who inspired Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing. Hate groups provided the rhetoric and provide the rhetoric, but it is individuals who act. To this end, I look to the leadership of this city council to empower all organizations working to interdict and end white supremacy extremism, even where that makes us uncomfortable. I hope we can strengthen the bridge between law enforcement communities, our intelligence community, academics, and community activists and advocates. Perhaps this even means finding a path to focusing a partnership with the JTTF on the real terror threat facing our communities, white supremacy extremism. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak on this historic and heartening day. I applaud your initiative and work and look forward to all forging a path together to a just and inclusive city and region, free of hatred, fear, and intimidation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
I'm Shedrick Wilkins, and I think that racism, sexism, and homophobia are a form of mental illness. I think if you follow these lines of thinking, you won't be able to think rationally. I think we have inventors that in history tend to be white, and so people associate white people with great things. Well, that's not true at all. NASA has scientists that are of different races and colors and sexes. So I do believe that racism will lead a person to forms of violence eventually. And the only reason why I want to hear a racist talk is I want to know where he comes from and where he's getting these ideas.
Next three, please, Carla.
Next three are.
Thank you for your testimony.
Are Joey
Thank you.
Gibson, Steve, and the last name starts with a D, and Nicholas Carroll.
If you want to start on this side, please.
Yeah, my name is Joey Gibson. I'm the founder of Patriot Prayer. I have a brown daughter. I have a white son. I believe that they're both equally beautiful. I believe they have a great future in front of them, and anyone who would make my daughter feel like less of a person because of the color of her skin, or make my son feel like less of a person because of the color of his skin, I think is a horrible thing, and I'm here to denounce all forms of white supremacy and hate. With that being said, I'd like to read from Corinthians. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. The truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. I think that it's great to denounce white supremacy, and I think that looking at this resolution, there's a lot of, the word hate is in it a lot, and it's about what you guys are against, what you denounce. But I think that you have to have a solution, and I do believe the solution is love, without a doubt. You cannot fill in a dark room with more darkness or more hatred. We have to bring light into it, and I do believe the answer is love. And if you guys are serious about attacking hatred and fixing that problem that you have in the city of Portland, there's one fact that we all have to admit, okay? Hatred doesn't care about the color of your skin. It doesn't care about your gender, your sexuality. It doesn't care if you're Republican or Democrat. It doesn't matter if you're liberal or conservative. It wants to infect every single person in this world who allows it to happen. And unless we can admit that no one is immune to hatred, it doesn't matter if you're conservative. There is a problem with hatred with conservatives. There's a problem with hatred and Patriot Prayer. There's been a problem with hatred with liberals and Democrats, communists, Antifa. It is a problem, and I see it, and I'm just as guilty as anybody else. And I think that that's something that we have to talk about, and we have to admit the fact that hatred is not just about racism. It is a form of hatred, is what racism is. And so I've seen hatred get out of control, and I know that I've made a lot of mistakes in the city of Portland. I stand by my decisions, but I do believe that we have to admit the fact that hatred is going to infect every single person who allows it. And I appreciate you guys bringing this to the forefront and bringing this out for people to have this conversation.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Sir,
Thanks
could
for
you
letting me
lean
speak.
forward so we can hear you?
My name is Steve Drury, and I've been in and around Portland all my life. And I remember severe racism. You know, the guys with the tats on their neck, the scary-looking dudes with all the sevens. To me, that's a pure racist. Now, I was sitting on my cam, and I heard about this racist guy, and he was going to speak at Clark College. So I jump up out of my chair like a citizen. I'm going to beat him down. But I got to know him. There's not a racist bone in that man's body right there. And I don't see how anybody could condemn him of any such thing. Why don't you get to know him? Are you that afraid? I wasn't. Maybe just a little. I was going into a den of racists. I was going to die. This is what I meant. Nicest guy in the world. 2 kids, home, business owner, just a regular Christian guy. His Bible and his family. What I did find out is it kind of gets on his nerves when there's masked criminals running around Portland. And you're allowing it. That's what gets on his nerves. Yeah, look at me. I'm looking right at you. We know you're doing it. We know this is what this is all about. What, has Antifa scared you that bad, Ted? Really? They don't scare me. I got tape. Come on, let's go on a walk. We can pray. Have about 500 jackasses pushing you, spitting on you because you want to pray. Well, we have a freedom of expression here. I can see your point about racist. We don't want racism. That's been dead in Portland forever. Okay. I don't see it like I did. Okay? It was all over. 30 years ago, Portland was completely full of it. Portland's got a real good job of getting rid of it. Now, I don't live here every day, okay? So forgive me if I don't see it. But here's what I do see. All kinds of people show up to rallies. People they've never met. They buy a Patriot Prayer shirt online and come out there and start cussing at people. I really think the content of a man's character is way more important than branding someone Patriot Prayer so you're thrown out of Portland. How about we take each individual by their actions? He was saying somebody was racist and said something. Let's hold that person accountable. We have no clue who shows up in black masks. Are you going to hold everybody accountable for what the black? No. You're going to take one individual. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Wheel and Commissioners. My name is Nicholas Carroll. I'm a city employee, but I'm on my lunch break speaking personal experience. This is very personal for me, so I thank you for this resolution. I'm a product of a mixed-race marriage. My dad is a white man from Kansas. When he joined the Air Force in the Vietnam War, they stationed him in Thailand, where he met a Thai girl. They got married and had 3 children, and they celebrate their 50th anniversary in December this year. So they proved that love does transform boundaries of cultural and race and religion. So I participate in some of these rallies, and some people, friends of mine, ask me why I do it. I think Commissioner Saltzman had said in a meeting last year that if we didn't show up, if the counter protester group didn't show up, they might get tired and not come to Portland anymore. But a week after Charlottesville massacre, there was a rally in Boston where white supremacists showed up. And there's a famous picture where 50 of them were huddled in a gazebo in a park, and 40,000 Boston people showed up on solidarity with the people of Charlottesville. And then last week in my hometown in Stone Mountain, Georgia, the white supremacists had a rally. Stone Mountain's famous for the Klan burning crosses on top. And so the white supremacists canceled the rally when the anti-protesters showed up. So as one who's participated in these events, like the August 4th one was the most intense, and it's kind of disheartening some of the tactics that the police use to feel like it's used against the citizens of Portland. We're defending our city from these people who do not live and work in Portland, and we feel that they're draining the resources of the police department. There's so many things the police can do that is good for the city, and they should not be having to spend overtime dressed up in riot gear, babysitting these 2 groups from attacking each other. I think hate speech is not protected speech. They should pay for their own security. It's draining the city's resources, and it needs to stop. I think I don't want another summer like the last 2 that we had. I think we're better than that. But I thank you, Mayor, and the commissioners for what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next 3, please, Carla.
The last 2 who signed up are Robert West and Jesse West.
Hi, my name is Jesse West. I'm mixed. I'm half Mexican, half white. My dad over here is Robert West, and my mom's Mexican. A lot of people have been like Antifa. I've seen some officers say that my dad's racist, do alls and all that, right? But the same people that are saying that he's racist are the ones doing racist stuff to me. If any of you guys know Officer Samson Najir, he arrested me a few years ago for no reason. I was in booking for 10 hours. They released me with no charges or nothing because I didn't do nothing illegal. I had another officer.
Mr. West, I'm going to have to ask you, can you keep this to the resolution at hand?
Okay,
please?
yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
But what I like, you guys want to stop racism. In my belief, stop racism. Well, I'm pretty sure a lot of it happens from parents teaching their kids, oh yeah, this is what you do, this is not what you do. This is what you do, this is not what you do. And there is some officers that are racist. So how can you stop racism on the street if you can't stop it by having knowing racist parents teaching their kids racism? These kids are gonna grow up learning that. You know, I grew up in Portland. I'm 24 or 23, about to be 24 soon. Look, I lived in Portland like 20 years of my life. I've ran into 6 racist encounters. 2 of them by officers, 4 of them by civilians. You know, my dad, he gets along with preachers of prayer. If they get along with him, I'm pretty sure they're not racist. Nazis, they don't get along with people that get along with another race. My dad has a kid with a Mexican. And to be honest, when my dad first married her, she used to be illegal. She got her paperwork, she became a citizen. She's a law-abiding citizen, she's a Christian. If you even met her, you would respect her. Everybody that meets her respects her because she always treats everybody with respect, you know? A lot of my family, they go through a bunch of racism, a lot of my friends. And it's not just from civilians, it's from police too. But I'm not saying all police are racist. Not all of them are racist. I've seen some good police officers, I've seen some bad ones. You know, just like civilians, there's good and bad civilians. But I believe a lot of the racism gets taught down by the parents teaching their kids their racist ways. And yeah, I believe it should stop. You know, I've been attacked over racism stuff like that. My dad's been attacked, like by verbally. You know, I don't agree with racism. And to be honest, I don't really like saying skin color like black, yellow, white, because that's still, my opinion is still racism, because you're judging, or you're saying a person by their skin color. There's people, like, I have a roommate, he's African. Oh, he's African-American, he's a citizen now, but he was originally from Africa, from Ethiopia. You know, I have friends that are Mexican, I have friends that are, you know, Asian, I have friends that are Islander, I got friends of all kinds of races. I don't say, oh, I have a brown friend, I have a yellow friend, I have a white friend, I have a black friend, you know? I tell them by their races, because if you mention it by the skin color, that's when it starts becoming racist. When you start naming them by their ethnicity, their race, it's not really racism because that's their race. That's who they are. And you should be proud of who you are.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Robert West, and lately I've joined the Patriots of Prayer. I was told all I got to do is say I am, and I am. And I don't consider the Patriots of Prayer racist. I met Joey Gibson. I talked to him several times. He's a Christian guy. Okay, he may not have the same beliefs and philosophies as other people, but he stands by his beliefs. Okay, under the U.S. Constitution, regardless if you like it or not, people have a right to their beliefs. Okay, I don't like the resolution, and I'll tell you why. Because there is nothing in this resolution that says what a racist is, what a racist group is, what an alt-right group is. Who's going to make that determination? Does city council make that determination? Does the police make that determination? Does the state make that determination? What is a racist group? What is an alt-right group? And that's what I'm curious about. What do you guys consider Patriot Prayer alt-right? Do you guys consider the Proud Boys alt-right? Do you consider the Hammerskins alt-right? So the question is who's going to determine what these groups are? Okay. Second of all, is you need to determine if it's a gang that you're looking at or an individual. If they qualify under a gang, If you say, okay, this resolution is against gangs, then you need to determine what a gang is. Under the ORS, 5 people committing a crime can be considered a gang. So the question for you guys is, like I said, it was poorly wrote up because no one knows and no one has any authority as to who's alt-right and who's not. Who, can any of you guys say for a fact that Patriot of Prayer is an alt-right group? Okay, what if they say, well, we're not an alt-right group? Okay, who's there to make that determination? Well, yeah, you're an alt-right group. Who's going to make that determination? It's a nice resolution. It's wrote up to make Portland look good, and we're against racism. But it has no authority whatsoever. It's like, Portland police have a gang unit. Okay, they have one officer that's assigned to white supremacist organizations. They have 40
Thank you.
assigned to
Appreciate
black
it.
and
That
Hispanic
completes our
groups.
public testimony for the day. Thank you. Any further discussion before we call the roll? I just want to make one point of clarification. The last testimony we heard does not apparently reflect anything that is actually in this resolution, and I want to just be very clear about that. Carla, please call the roll.
Fritz.
So it's both my challenge and my honor to bring us back to why we're here. And I want to remind us all about Nicole Grant's speech at the beginning of this hearing and how very moving that was. And I appreciate very much your work on this resolution, along with Asena Lawrence in Commissioner Fish's office, Cynthia Castro in my office, Winter Johannes in Commissioner Udaley's office, all women of color who have experienced this on a daily basis for as long as they've been in Portland, as well as Derek Bradley in Commissioner Hardesty's office. So thank you for helping us understand what would be helpful and for putting in words some of the history that we need to acknowledge, that we are acknowledging today. Because yes, there are lots of hateful people in Portland and in our country. And yes, there is a great need for us all to unite and to emphasize love. And we have to recognize the history of this city and of this country and of white people nationwide, worldwide. I am not proud of many of the things that my ancestors did, being from England, and the colonization, the slavery, the invasion of this country, the annihilation of the Native American people. I'm not proud of any of those, and I'm sorry for all of them. I'm sorry for what has happened in Portland over the last 200 years, and it's up to us to acknowledge these hurts, and they're not the hurts of yesterday. They are ongoing hurts. There is ongoing lack of wealth in for people of color in Portland because of not being able to own property in the right places or keep property, and because of not being able to get education and jobs, because of having higher incarceration rates, poorer health outcomes. All of the things that we have been acknowledging actively since 2010 when Mayor Adams and I heard the community and decided to move forward with establishing an equity program within the City of Portland to change the way that City of Portland, the 6,000 people who work for the City of Portland, acknowledge and understand and work to make reparations on the hurts that have been done by the City Council in the past. And we're not nearly where we need to be. Our community is not where it needs to be, and our community is so divided with all of the horrible things that are happening both in our country and worldwide. And that's why we have to come together, to unite, to say what we do believe in. And part of what we do believe in is that this pretense that that racism doesn't exist, or because I have an ex as a friend or family member, I'm therefore not racist. We need to acknowledge and correct and move forward. And I particularly appreciate that this resolution is not only a statement of our values. it is important to state our values. And it's important that all 5 of us have been a part of creating this resolution and that we are all supporting it today. We have community advisors in many different places in the city who do us the honor of forgiving the fact that we haven't done a very good job of community engagement in the past. We haven't necessarily included all communities. And now we have the New Portlanders Policy Commission, and we have the Human Rights Commission, and many other citizen bodies who are willing to give us, the council, that chance to make amends, and I appreciate that. So thank you to the Human Rights Commission in particular, who last year denounced white supremacist groups and reaffirmed the commitment to dismantling structural racism in our city per the articles of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Thank you, Alan Lazo, previous chair of the Human Rights Commission, now from the Portland United Against Hate. Thank you for all of the groups that have come together since the fall of 2016 to make sure that we do talk to each other more, work together more, and stick together more. I do acknowledge that some people may be concerned that this resolution is just empty words. If you go to the 1900 buildings, look at the 1900 buildings where the Bureau of Development Services is, look at the placard honoring former city employee and Army veteran Rick Best, who was killed standing up to hate during the Max incident nearly 2 years ago. The placard reads, "I can't stand by and do nothing. Neither can we, and we won't." Aye.
Fish.
Well, I got up a minute ago and made a phone call because something popped up on my phone, and today we announced that a very distinguished candidate for a high city office had accepted the position. She's the deputy commissioner for the Parks and Recreation System in New York City, and a first in her class, if you will, youngest ever to be borough commander, first woman to that position. And I think we give people a lot of latitude when they make comments, but someone chose this moment to attack her based on what they perceive to be her race and her sexual orientation. And as I said to the reporter, even by the loose guidelines of your newspaper, you need to take that down because it's not in the public record, it's not appropriate, and it's just completely inappropriate for someone to write such a thing. So if we need a reminder, and I don't often look to the comment section of the newspapers because I think that's in the area that sometimes operates below the sewer. It is, in fact, where some people anonymously feel comfortable sharing things, which I think give us something of the temperature of our times. This has been a long week for us and a week in which this council has stepped up and done some of its finest work. And here's a little secret about this council, and it's been the same my entire 10 years. We do our best work when all 5 members of the council are engaged and when we can build consensus. There's nothing particularly noble about a 3-2 vote or a closely divided issue. What I often conclude from some of the sort of more conflicted votes that we have is that I wished in retrospect we had more time to build a consensus, which is always within our reach, but takes the time and the humility to engage people's perspectives. And when we do that, we get to a better place. And I'm extremely proud to be on a council that is going to vote 5-0 in support of this resolution. I gave my closing statement as an opening statement, so I won't bore you with the speech a second time, although it probably reads better the second time. I will say this. I listened very carefully not only to Nicole's beautiful statement, and Nicole handles the hardest portfolio in the mayor's office and probably ends up getting the most crap on a daily basis of any staff person in the building. And I think what she's hearing from this dais is how proud we are about what she did today and her comment and the way she spoke from her heart and shared her story. We can agree or disagree about issues that come before this dais, but we can also take a moment to be proud of a public servant that's willing to come forward and share her story. And we should acknowledge that. But here's in addition to thanking Asena Lawrence, Asena, would you raise your hand, please, who is my policy advisor and works so hard on this resolution with each of our offices and staff. I have a special request. I think someday people are going to look back on this resolution in this moment and say that maybe, and this is what I hope, we chose a different and novel path for how we were going to address a number of related issues in our community. And many of the people who testified today have very strong views about how to deal with disruptions on our streets and the rise of hate groups and other things. And they have presented a path that is different than some of the legislative fixes that we've debated in the past. So I think people are going to come back and want to look at this resolution. And here's the challenge. They're not going to find the testimony unless they look separately for the testimony, because they have to go and through another database find the record. And by the way, people testify at a microphone, words get missed. It's not word for word always as accurate as it could be. So my request to Eric, Amy, Bobbin, Alan, Maria, and Wajdi, who today have shared with us absolutely superb testimony. In fact, I think one of the best presentations we've ever had, and you elevated the conversation so beautifully. I would ask that each of you consider emailing your testimony to Carla so that your testimony can be made part of the record with the resolution, so that someone doesn't have to go find your testimony through some other database, so that forever the resolution will be married with your statements. And I hope you'll consider that. My office would be happy to help. Even we'd be happy to take simple Xeroxes if that's easier. But please don't leave without having your testimony memorialized as part of the packet, because I think you've done something special today, and each of you said something important and inspired each of us. Colleagues, I appreciate the way we've worked on this, as we have worked this week on many other issues, and I hope this is the beginning of a pattern in how this council operates.
Hardesty?
You don't have to look far. Just to the comment section of any newspaper to find out whether or not racism is still alive and well in Oregon. In fact, anytime there's an article or an issue around race, you don't even have to look far in the comments to see the hatred, to see the white supremacist mindset of those who like to be anonymous when they write their hate speech. I am extremely proud of this city council because I made a request of the state of Oregon in July of 2017. That request to our state elected leaders was that they all sign on to a letter stating that they were opposed to white supremacist activity, hate groups, and the alt-right organizing in the state of Oregon. At the time that I made that request, I was told that most of our state elected leaders had signed on and they were just waiting for one more signature. Again, that was July 2017. We're still waiting for that last signature to show up. That letter has never been finalized and published. I'm saddened by that, because anybody that grew up during the civil rights movement understands what happens when we are silent in the face of hate, organized hate groups taking over our community. I'm proud of my colleagues because we were all not of like minds in the beginning, but we worked hard to get to a consensus about what we would present today and then what would happen after today. Because I don't believe anyone in this room believes that today is going to fix what's broken in our society. It won't. But I also want to remind you that as an African-American woman who is African-American 365 days a year and 366 on leap years, I can assure you that racism is alive and well in Oregon. I can assure you that today I feel less safe walking the streets of Portland than I have ever done in my almost 30 years here. I can tell you the vile language that I have seen people use to be derogatory against people who speak a different language, who look a different way, who came from another country, has been more prevalent since the election of the current president than it has been in my entire time here. So where does leadership come if it doesn't come from the top? Certainly it doesn't come from Washington, D.C. today, but it will again. I want to remind people that hate crimes happen every single day in the city of Portland. Many of us remember May 26, 2017, because that was the day Jeremy Christensen stabbed 2 people to death and injured 1 severely. But how many of you remember what happened the day before, May 25th, 2017, when Demetria Hester was attacked by Jeremy Christensen on the exact same Max line at the exact same time of day? She wasn't believed. She was not considered a victim. She was not treated like you would expect someone to be treated who was a victim of a hate crime. I ask you, what would have happened had she been treated like a victim and Jeremy had been arrested and held somewhere? I know for one thing, he would not have been on the train on May 26th. Portland has a lot to make up for as it relates to racial reconciliation, and today is the beginning of that process. I want to take this moment to really appreciate all my colleagues. The mayor's office has taken the lead on this, but every single office has been involved in this resolution. And you have my commitment today that this resolution is the beginning and not the end of a process. It is the beginning of an acknowledgement that we have a lot of work to do in this community, and that we, as a city council, are willing to stand with our community and make sure that this community is really a place where people are safe, regardless of who they are and what their skin tone is and where they were born. I am pleased to vote aye for this resolution.
Daly?
Not every bigot is a racist, but every racist is a bigot. And this resolution is about hate in all its forms, which you would know if you read it in its entirety. But it does specifically call out white supremacy and alt-right organizations for the simple fact that far right-wing extremists, as Eric noted earlier, are responsible for all of the extremist killings in 2018 and most of the killings in the previous decade, including in our own city. I want to take a moment to talk about white silence. I want to give a lot of white people the benefit of the doubt. I think a lot of people don't want to misspeak. They don't want to speak on behalf of community members who they do not represent. They don't want to bring up unpleasant topics. They don't want to cause more harm by repeating hateful language. But silence isn't neutral. Silence makes us complicit. And as Audre Lorde said, your silence will not protect you. It certainly doesn't protect the very people that we're here today to stand up for, who are targets of hate and racism in our community. And I have to point out that this week we passed an item that was somewhat controversial. It was a settlement with a former Portland police officer who made unforgivable racist remarks. And 3 sergeants, all white, and 1 lieutenant stepped up and called him out and held him accountable. And I want to once again commend them for that. It's something all of us should do as a normal matter of course, but it's not something we hear from the Police Bureau every day. Colleagues, today I'm reminded of the passage of the Welcoming Inclusive Sanctuary City resolution at early 2017, although this is certainly a much more solemn and respectful occasion. At that time, we knew it was not enough to simply pass a resolution, yet it was clear that council needed to speak with one voice about our shared values and commitment to protecting our immigrant and refugee communities. That resolution helped lay the groundwork for meaningful action, and we're in a similar place today. In light of escalating violence and threats to our communities, we need to explicitly reject white supremacy in the many forms it exists. Today's resolution is simply one step in a series of actions Council has taken and will continue to take as we seek meaningful remedies to individual and systemic racism. I'm proud of the city's partnership with Portland United Against Hate, which has grown to a coalition of 65 community-based organizations and neighborhood groups. They recently launched reporthatepdx.com, where community members can access a reporting tool, training opportunities and resources, including counseling for individuals who are targets of hate, speech, and crime, and connection to other advocacy networks. I look forward to continuing to work with the coalition. Many of us on council are already integrating anti-hate policies and practices into the work of our bureaus. For example, PBOT's Walking While Black focus groups have informed the Bureau's understanding and commitment to increasing safety in the public right-of-way for Black residents who, as Nicole Grant shared at our opening, have to move through public space with an awareness and caution that the majority of us do not. In civic life, we're taking a more holistic approach to our conflict mediation work. Because we recognize that interpersonal conflicts are often a reflection of larger societal issues, we're investing in our community's ability to better understand race, immigration, and other challenging topics through our newly formed Civic Dialogues program. White supremacy is a public safety issue and a national security threat. A clear understanding of the magnitude of that threat should drive our decisions about where and how we invest our resources. At the federal level, I was disappointed to learn that the DOJ and FBI backed away from aggressively tracking and addressing alt-right extremism for political reasons in 2009. So I'm proud to be a member of a council that doesn't shy away from addressing white supremacy head-on and look forward to helping to craft and support the policies that will emerge as a result of this resolution. I want to thank everyone, well, almost everyone who testified today, and the community members who continue to show up to help us create a more welcoming and safe city for all. Finally, I want to thank Winta Johannes on my team, as well as my colleagues and their staff, with a special thanks to Nicole Grant and Asena Lawrence for their leadership on this issue. I vote aye.
Wheeler?
Colleague, I'm sure we've all heard the concerns that this resolution is purely symbolic. We've also heard that this resolution will ultimately change nothing. In truth, I have to confess that that has also been a concern of mine as well. I know that some of you have been struggling with this issue. So why support it then? Why bring this resolution forward? White supremacy is fed by silence and complacency, which naturally results in complicity. My silence on issues, any issue, is almost always noted. I've spoken out against hate before, of course, and I've made it clear that I don't see a place for hate or divisiveness in our community. When I've said that, however, I haven't been standing by my colleagues and communicating that message as a unified city council voice. I'm doing that today. What does it mean for our community to come to grips with its shared discriminatory history? What does it mean for a majority white institution to denounce white supremacy and white nationalism? And what does it mean to finally have the first Black female commissioner on this dais at a time when the federal administration continues to peddle racist and exclusionary attitudes to its base? The alt-right continues to grow bolder by the day with increasingly violent activity. We all share power on this dais, and we all share power in this community. Collectively, our silence on these issues is damning, and it only provides fertile ground for hate to flourish. Communities of color should not have to wait until white people have been educated by friends or colleagues. And they shouldn't have to wait until white people have a person of color in their families before recognizing and taking action against the insidiousness and immorality of racism. People are now emboldened to express hate, spread fear, and do harm against those who simply look different from them. As an elected official, I believe all of us on this dais have a moral obligation to speak out against white supremacy and white nationalism and stand together with all Portlanders. In 2018, as you've heard, every extremist murder had ties to far-right extremism. In other words, the facts back our rhetoric on this resolution. If last year, according to the Anti-Defamation League, was the fourth deadliest year for domestic extremist violence since 1970, what can we expect for 2019? What does it mean for our city, often referred to by the national media as, quote, the whitest, unquote, large city in America? What does this mean for a community trying to live up to progressive ideals, oftentimes missing its own blind spots, while coming to terms with its racist past and present? It means that because we operate at a deficit of perspective, we have more work to do despite our good intentions. It's a fundamental recognition that we have to prioritize these issues because our demographics and history skew towards disenfranchising and disempowering communities of color that have been unable to benefit from our city's progress. This resolution matters because there is a clear connection between language and action. We're seeing this play out on a weekly basis, where the hateful words of those in power galvanize the hateful actions of those who follow them. Words do matter. They have an impact because they fundamentally reflect our values as Portlanders and as Americans. Several of us on this dais are still learning and coming to grips with the ways in which our own actions and policies may unintentionally reinforce white supremacist structures in our city. And still, we are united and determined in rebuking white supremacy and racism. Yes, words do matter, but words that are never spoken also matter. Now is the time for us to speak loudly and clearly about what we value as elected officials. We were elected to ensure the well-being of this city and its residents. This resolution provides a clear signal to people of color that we are on your side, and we will do everything that we can to ensure your safety and honor your dignity as human beings. This is not a silver bullet, but I'm hopeful that this resolution is a start and that it's followed by meaningful, determined action. In closing, Nicole, as always, you've stepped up. You have allowed yourself to be vulnerable in a public space. You have spoken truth. You have spoken your truth, but it reflects the truth of so many people in this community. I just feel honored to have you as part of my team. And I want to thank you in particular for the work that you did on this resolution and the work that you did to bring the community together to help make this a reality today. And I want to thank Asena Lawrence from Commissioner Fish's office, who worked hand in hand with Nicole to make sure that this would be a reality. And as my other colleagues have indicated, there was not a single person on this dais and not a staff in this building that was not actively engaged in this resolution. That's how seriously we take this issue. Thank you all. I want to thank my colleagues. I vote aye. The resolution is adopted. And there being no further business today, we are adjourned.